Well, hello there. Welcome to the series of podcasts that are going to change your life if you are today's woman. This podcast is brought to you by GAIA Africa, a private members business club for women committed to developing and servicing the top 5% of Africa's lustrous female founders, corporate CEOs, other C-suite executives, professionals, board members, business innovators, and creatives. The 5-episode podcast series is sponsored by Pinnacle Oil and Gas, an indigenous oil and gas company active across the entire downstream value chain with emphasis on petroleum, trading, marketing, distribution, and retail segments of the Nigerian oil and gas sector. My name is Adesuwa Onyenokwe, and I'm pretty excited about doing this because a casual conversation with a founder of GAIA got us here. We're going to be having this conversation with 3 powerful women in the HR sector in our country. And the whole concept of human capital recognizes that labor is equal, but these 3 powerful women are Olatowun Candide-Johnson, who's sitting right by my side, and 2 are going to be signing in. Kofo Ati-John is dialing in from London. Hello, Kofo.
Hello.
And Mayowa Kuyero is dialing in from Lagos, correct?
That's correct. Hello.
Welcome. But sitting right here with me is Olatowun Candide-Johnson herself. Candide-Johnson. Why do I keep calling it Candide?
It's Candide.
Do you have people doing that to you all the time?
Yeah, I do.
And you have to correct it?
I do.
But we call you CJ.
TCJ.
TCJ, preferably. Right. And before you begin to speak, I must introduce you to the listeners because Olatowun is a lawyer with over 30 years of experience in corporate and commercial law and in the business development and governance of multinational corporations. During the course of her career, she worked in law practice, shipping, and oil and gas. In 2018, Olatowun founded GAIA Africa, a member-only business and social club for women leaders in Lagos to facilitate business connections and expand financial bottom lines. So, Olatowun, how did we end up here?
Good question. So, well, first of all, hello to everyone that's listening and, welcome to this podcast. Before I speak, the first thing I should say is that this podcast series is sponsored by Pinnacle Oil and Gas Limited, who were very, very pleased to support the podcast once it was mentioned because they are very strong believers in the power of parity. So thank you to Pinnacle Oil and Gas. GAIA Africa's vision is to contribute to the socio-economic growth and transformation of Africa by empowering women to organize around principles of female leadership and participation in business. By bringing together leading African women in a safe space where they can learn, network, collaborate, sponsor one another, we believe that we can do exactly that. So on the 11th of November, 2021, GAIA Africa held its inaugural business forum as part of our Clubhouse launch activities. The subject of the forum was Gender Parity and Economic Growth for Africa, with our guest speaker, Mayowa Kuyero,
That's right now.
From Lagos. Mayowa, yes, being a partner at McKinsey who presented McKinsey's 2019 Power of Parity report that she co-authored. So we couldn't have had a better person with us. So after this presentation and it was an excellent presentation, first of all, and then it was a very, very interesting and interactive discourse which we held around that subject. We then realized that we could actually build on the McKinsey paper and perhaps further effect some change using the data presented, but through advocacy. And then just as it happened, Folashade Ambrose Medebem, who will be on one of these podcasts as well today, and is one of GAIA Africa's founding members, volunteered to steer the ship, just to basically ensure that we carry out our purpose, not to stop the discussion at the business forum. So thank you to her too. So this has brought us to today, and let me just specially mention Mayowa, who has been our gateway basically to this power of parity, the data, as well as to the five roads I call it the 5 roads to success, but it's the 5 roads to further narrowing that gap. To you, Adesuwa, of course, who happily agreed to partner with us to moderate the podcast, all our collaborators who will speak, Kofo, who is on here as well right now and is also a GAIA Africa founding member, to our he for she's, because we have some men on the podcast as well. And last but certainly not the least is Mena Imasaka, who is our business development and operations manager, who has really led this project. Worked very hard, led this project to this discussion today. So a big thank you to everybody.
Great. I think we should just dive deeply in. What I keep hearing you say when we talked about this, if not for nothing else, let's move the needle a little bit, which is why I would like Mayowa to jump in here, because Mayowa's the research that the paper that you authored is called The Power of Parity, Advancing Gender Equality in Africa. And I thought I should just read a little bit about who you are. Mayowa is a partner in McKinsey's Lagos office and one of the leaders of McKinsey's Africa Financial Institutions practice. And I believe that there might have been some shocking things for you when you were on ground. So as you're diving into this conversation, think about what human capital is and what the surprising things were that hit you as you were on the set. In the field, I beg your pardon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adesuwa. Let me just give you a little bit of background as to why we wanted to write the report. McKinsey globally sort of does a lot of research around gender parity, and in 2015 had done a global parity report. We then repeated the research in 2019, but focused only on Africa as opposed to a global effort. And I think there were 2 or 3 things that some of it made me happy, but some of it was quite shocking. The first one was that actually, since 2015 and 2019, when you look at the data, the world in general has made very little progress. And I think that's why Olatowun's been pushing on about moving the needle, because the needle has not moved since 2015. When you look at the data, the needle has not moved. And I think that was one thing that actually was quite sad. And in certain indicators, so things like women on cabinet roles across Africa, things such as gender representation in boardrooms, not only have we not moved, in certain respects, we've moved backwards.
Wow.
So in no other time of the world, I think, have we had as much focus, as much discourse around gender parity. But when you look at the facts say actually we've stagnated and in certain respects even moved back.
Okay.
And I don't think that is cool. Something has to be done.
Yeah, I guess that's why you have the 5 steps that Tom mentioned earlier. But I would like to pull in Kofo at this time, who's blissfully enjoying a retirement as she's dialing in from London. Kofo is a graduate of French and Arts, and very recently she retired as the General Manager Human Resources, overseeing the Deep Water District of the Nigeria-based French multinational Total E&P Nigeria Limited, after more than 3 decades of wide-ranging experience in the Human Resources Division, implementing key deliverables and strategic partnerships with the business. Now, Kofo, based off of what Mayowa has spoken, are you surprised that we're still talking about moving the needle today? And based off of your experience as someone who was in the Human Resources Department most of her life?
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I would say that I'm not really surprised, because one thing that we haven't really done well is investing in our human capital. Simply put, human capital really encompasses collective resources possessed by either individuals or groups within a given population. But now it's more than just your human resources, because we always say your human resources are your assets. But then these assets are intangible. It's not as tangible as your bottom line, your finance, but there's an economic value on human resources. which really makes our economy grow. And if our economy hasn't grown the state it should today, that means that there's something that we're not really doing right. We really need to move forward. We need to move forward on investment in our human capital. Our human capital really is what constitutes our wealth, the wealth of either a company or a country. And if we're still where we are today, it means that our most valuable asset, which is our human resources, because that we have in numbers. I mean, we're a population of almost 200 million. So basically, we're immensely endowed, I must say, in terms of human resources. But if we're still where we are today in terms of unskilled labor, unemployment, that means that we really haven't moved the needle forward.
Thank you. And I think, Tone, you were speaking earlier today about the fact that it seemed, or it appears, I think Mayowa also said something like that. It appears that based off of the last report, it appears that Nigeria is doing well in the workplace. You know, what's happening, tell me about it.
Okay. So before I do that, can I just give some world stats?
Go ahead.
So that
Go ahead.
I found some,
to situate what we're talking about. Go ahead.
I found some WEF, so World Economic Forum statistics. Mm-hmm. And what really jumped out at me was the number of years that they have calculated that it will take us to get to parity in different aspects. So they measure 4 different things, one of which is general parity, right? So for general parity, they're saying that we actually took a step back in the world compared to between 2021 and 2020. Between 2020 and 2021, we actually took a step back by about 0.6 percentage points. But they're saying that on the current trajectory, it will take 135.6 years to close the gender gap worldwide, right? So that's pretty scary. For political empowerment, it will take 145 years. For economic participation and opportunity, it will take 267 years.
Isn't that discouraging?
Well, it's kind of like it's.
What do you? I mean, I can see.
It's scary. It's scary because you're wondering, okay, so because when we talk about moving the needle, and that's why I always talk about just moving the needle, because literally you can only move the needle by so much,
So we shouldn't let that stop us.
We can't let it stop us. We mustn't let it. I mean, I think that's so scary as these sort of data points are. I think that's what sort of pushes us to try and do more, as much as we can. But it's incredible because they're talking generally also about the general statistics, and they're saying that this doesn't even take into consideration the effect of the pandemic and the fact that more women lost their jobs over the pandemic, obviously, because guess what? They were needed at home to look after kids. So there's that. LinkedIn has data that shows that there's a marked decline in women being hired into leadership and managerial positions. So when we were talking earlier, I was talking about the situation, and probably Mayowa can talk about this even better than I can. Not probably, she can. They have different categories, and one of the categories, I think, is how a country is situated in terms of its movements. And I think we are kind of like we've moved in the workplace situation in terms of the gender, male versus female. I can't say parity.
And it's not parity; it's just the presence.
Well, I guess there are a lot more women that are working, but where are they working is not necessarily where they should be working. Because just in terms of leadership, in terms of managerial positions, you won't find that many women. But yes, there are in the workplace, And so I'm sure that Mayowa can explain that better. But I know there are leaders there.
You did a fantastic job.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Mayowa, because I mean, when you talk about the fact that there's no parity in the Nigerian workplace, people will tell you, but women, who stops them from working? They're working.
Mm-hmm. No, so, we look at parity on 2 axes. One is parity at work and parity in society. And even parity at work, yes, you can say we have women in the workplace, but then when you double click, what are the types of jobs they're doing? They are doing highly informal, highly vulnerable jobs. So I think Olatowun said during the pandemic, women were disproportionately affected, right? We also talk about the fact that when you look at the career progression, women might be 50-50, but by the time you go to the leadership position, we're at 20, 25, 22. And we're celebrating and saying we have parity. We definitely don't, right? So the question is, what is happening in the middle rung, or the middle rung of the ladder? How do we support women? How do we invest in the human capital so that we don't have women dropping out of the workplace? We don't have people in vulnerable employment, and people are empowered enough to be able to sort of positively impact their lives.
Maybe that's where Kofo can come in. You talked earlier about investing in human capital. What does that mean, actually? What should we be doing actively?
Well, I mean, we need to train. We need to further train. We need to upskill our human capital. Because basically, what are we talking about? We've discovered now over the pandemic that there has been a shift, and digital literacy is something that has become very prominent. And so if you do not have any knowledge of, if you don't have any technological skills, then that is a fundamental problem. The way we work these days, I mean, has totally dislocated, I would say, the traditional ways of working. And so that's where we need to talk about skill gaps, where we need to make progress. So it is continuous training. It is exposing, and since we're talking about women, exposing women to real leadership roles. Today, women, like we say, they work in the lower level. I mean, I work in an organization where the women were mainly either secretarial or finance, okay, for an organization that was purely technological, engineering, exploration, production. But then we actually had a goal to try as much as possible to get women to positions of management by training them, by exposing them, by mentoring them as well, coaching them. So all of this is an investment in human capital that has to be done across the board.
Toun, do you think that such investment would help to close that gap? Because it appears that women disappear at a particular time. Online jobs towards chief executive roles, you don't find women there.
So that's a point I would have, I want to talk about where, because Mayowa already sort of started by talking about that broken rung. So the broken rung between when women, start, and then by the time they're getting into sort of middle management, they're dropping off, they're tapering off. Again, I want to bring in the issue of diversity and inclusion. Okay, so we talk about diversity and inclusion, but we don't necessarily, and when we talk about diversity and inclusion, for the most part, it's generally man, woman, and it's really not. It's about everything to do with, man, woman, your sexual orientation, etc., etc. However, what I have found is that, for me, inclusiveness means that a woman could get pregnant.
Recognizing that she could.
Yes, and that if she does, it's a natural thing. And, so don't treat it like an illness. Don't treat it like it's something that, you will find that there are many companies, especially the small ones, who won't take women on, especially if they're sort of like just starting, maybe they just got married or they're single, because they're worried that they're going to get pregnant. And if they get pregnant, then it means they're going to be out of the office, blah, blah, blah. However, so that's on the one hand. So the truth is that if we're talking about inclusivity, it means that, yes, you have to accept that women do have this tendency to have children, to bear children. And if they do, and they maybe taper off for some time, there needs to be a way back into, because, as I mentioned earlier, I was talking about the fact that women are having children later now, Okay, so a woman decides that, okay, she's going to now have a child at 40. So she's had a minimum of 15 years of experience, right? So she goes and she has this child. Now, suppose she decides she wants to take a year off because she wants to just be a mother. And then, now trying to get back into employment is difficult, and people are disregarding that experience. And I think that's just such a waste of experience that we're leaving, talent, thank you, that we're leaving on the table. So I think there needs to be a way back in. And I think part of treating this or repairing the broken wrong could be, ensuring that we do pay attention to these issues that stop women from progressing.
Excellent. I think Mayowa can pop in here, because Mayowa, people often talk about statistics. When we speak, let's talk about statistics to prove it. Do we have anything to prove that when women are getting employed, the question of whether you're going to have a baby becomes one thing that could stop you from moving forward on the job, and why? Do you have statistics to prove that?
So I don't have any numbers off the top of my head, but there's one thing I want to build on what Olatowun said. So we will talk about getting back into the workplace.
That's right.
See, ask yourself this question: how many places of work have a mother pumping room, a place for people to pump? I go to, because I'm a consultant, I go to all my clients' sites, and I have people on my teams having to pump in the cars, in the toilets, and you just think, what's all of this? I might as well just stay at home, because it's so difficult being a mother and trying to
express
fulfill
milk,
my obligations at work, as well as my obligations as a mother. I cannot express milk. I have to go into a toilet to do it. Mm-hmm. So how are our environments designed in a way that caters to the fact that women biologically will have children, will have to lactate, and all of that? So that's just one simple example. Mm-hmm. I have people telling me that when they started in consulting, sometimes there were no female toilets in the workplace, right? So, or you go to the female toilet and it's like one little cubicle. So we have not even designed the very place where we're supposed to be working to enable women to flourish, right? And so again, when we talk about investing in human capital, it's not even the big changes we're asking for. It's the little things that will enable women to be successful as professionals in the workplace today.
For example, can we just quickly name examples so people know what we're talking about? The crash, the
for example,
pumping room.
Having a mother's pumping room, a crash, not putting meetings at 7:00 because you know that there is children's or children's duty, just being flexible about the workplace. And it's not, we're not saying we're going to have less output. We're just saying make it more friendly for you as a woman to be able to come back after you have children.
Okay, Kofo, what do you say to you manage a business where you manage a lot of people who are working under you? What do you say to the fact, which men sometimes say, that even women themselves are not kind to women who come after them, that when they are on the top, right, and that the younger women give excuses? What do you have to say to that, and how do you use that to change the system? We're talking about change here now.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true and not true. I mean, I would say where there is an awareness now. Okay, so that's talking about diversity and inclusion. Where there is an awareness, and we talk about women getting to the top. One of the emphasis, of course, is, as you're getting there, like stretch out your hand and lift up another woman. And so while I was still in Total, we did have policies, and that was one of the things that actually helped mentoring women mentoring women, especially women in senior positions. And so those are the kind of things that we actually have to weave into the new policies and strategies going forward to ensure that there is an awareness that women if you've gotten this far, I mean, then you have an obligation to lift up another woman.
Well, that sounds good.
Sometimes it's tough. I mean, I would say that some women feel
entitled.
Okay, I've gotten there. I've worked so hard. I did it all on my own without anyone helping me, and therefore, I mean, you've got to do the same thing. But that's not the way it should be. We should be there to support one another. And it's one of the things that, I mean, I'm proud to be a GAIA woman, and that's one of the things that, I mean, we've always said at GAIA is that we're there to support one another, to lift one another, to encourage one another, and that's the way it should be. And I think the numbers would improve in organizations and even in the government, as long as we know that we're there to support one another.
Since our focus here today is basically on human capital, right? I want us to address the numbers. If we do not develop this huge 50%, what do we have to lose? And what do we have to gain? I mean, as vice versa.
So I know that, I believe it's McKinsey who says that, any society that does not reach parity, for as long as we continue like this, we're leaving, I think it's $26 trillion on the table. And Mayowa can correct me. It's something around that anyway. It's a huge, huge number. And, I don't think it's sustainable.
What we're doing right now?
No. Yeah, the way things are right now. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's not sustainable because it has clearly been shown that in the boardroom, in any women are required. That diverse way of thinking, the way we're built differently. Mm-hmm. And so, and we also think differently. And that is what it is. It is this diversity on a board, for example, that increases the financial bottom line. And I think that, the sooner we try to get to some sort of parity, the easier life will be. And, the better society will be. Of course, society will benefit a lot more. But until we are able to, and, it's funny because, well, it's not so funny. The 2022 IWD theme is #break the bias. And, it is clear that bias, conscious, unconscious, has actually played into this, this whole issue of,
Can we identify some basic biases, for example? Mm-hmm. Maybe we should. What basic biases would you say we're working on?
Well, the first thing is that we are. So I tell you one statistic that I read on IWD, I think last year or the year before, was that 94% of the world population is biased against women. So that is male and female, right? But in terms of regular bias, people are biased. People like to see people like them, right? And so I think that this is why men like to see men, in companies, and they unconsciously they are biased against women because they don't feel that women can do what they can do, et cetera, et cetera. There are many different types of biases.
What kind of biases? I mean, I want Mayowa to speak to that. Because you're a researcher, you went there, you're a consultant, you see many companies. These biases, is it in our heads? Because I know talking to some guys and they're like, you women, you just carry this thing around. There's no bias. How does a bias show?
So, I think now we've evolved into a place where it's politically correct or impolitically correct to be overtly biased. Mm-hmm. But I think Olatowun talks about unconscious bias. We always want to have people who look like us, right? And the bias can play out in saying, for example, let's go out for drinks, where I may not necessarily feel comfortable going out for drinks, but then that's where all the men network and know how to get business and sort of, get the mentorship and informal networks that enable them advance in their careers. So if you're going to pick who you're going to mentor, it's not going to be me who says, well, actually, I don't really want to go for drinks. I would rather do breakfast and then, so just little things that are unconscious. So it's not like an overt bias, it's an unconscious bias, but again, continues to make it difficult for women or people who do not necessarily look like the people in power advance, right? So it's actually a circular thing.
So until there's a direct intervention, is that call for the intervention that we're saying? That there must be a direct intervention because the status right now is at the boardroom. So all these interventions like ensure you do 30% representation. So those are things that we need. Doesn't it seem like we're going cap in hand and looking like people who are not, who have been punished for so long and now we are demanding rights that, we can find better ways to do it? Kofo, what do you think?
I think it is what we shouldn't do is put numbers to things. What we should do is make a conscious effort to move from our stereotype way of thinking to move forward and plan over a period of time. And so we need to look at the statistics. We need to look at indicators that would help us move forward. Because ordinarily, the statistics don't look good. And then we need to ask ourselves, why are the statistics looking the way they are? And then what do we need to do to move forward? And in that, we start putting in objective targets over a period of time. There's some who could be penalized for not meeting those targets. I'm not sure that's the way to go. I mean, because if you don't meet the targets over a period of time, it's something that could be explained, especially if the reasons are genuine. But then putting in objectives and targets like a percentage of women representation in senior positions on the board, those are things that need to be done.
Right. I think
because if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it.
Right. I see that. I see why there's value in what GAIA is trying to do. Create this kind of awareness to help people understand there needs to be some conscious movement towards that. So, but I just wonder, when we are asking for the space for women, we've talked about investing in developing the women to take new positions, and be there. And then I wonder though, and changing objectives and targets, I would like us to now be more specific about the kind of changes that we want to see. And I want each of you to spend 1 minute talking exactly what should we be doing. I will start with you, especially when it comes to human capital development.
Right. So my first thing would be education. The state of our education here is just not conducive, appropriate, correct for people in later life to take jobs. Seriously, I feel that strongly about it. I don't think that we have invested enough money in education. So we're talking about for girls, right? I mean, basically for boys and girls, but, and then also I think girls need to be encouraged into STEM. So science, technology, economics, and whatever. Because the future jobs, which we have to prepare, children for today, are all in technology, cloud computing, all kinds of different things that honestly you tend not to find so many women in. The other thing is I'm a great proponent for numbers. I believe that we need law to declare or policy to declare that a certain percentage of women should be, like Rwanda did. Rwanda said they have in their constitution that there must be 30% representation in all decision-making bodies in government. So that's one thing, because the truth is, if we think about it, sorry, it's gone over 1 minute. If you think about it, so men are making decisions that affect women in politics, in companies, in all over the place, right? It's not sustainable.
Right.
You can't know what one quick story. Sheryl Sandberg said in her book, Lean In, that when she joined, I think it was Google or Facebook, what some company, she joined, I think in the leadership position or on the board, pregnant. And she realized then that there was no toilet for women, and she had to walk, a long way to get there. And she, so her being there in a leadership position changed that. So if women are not in these positions, then, nothing will change. And if to get to those positions, we need the education, we need the training, we need to be able to match men.
You talk about legislation as well.
Yes,
totally. And Mayowa, what do you say?
One thing I'm going to talk about that we don't, I think it's particular to Nigeria, is actually the healthcare system. I love Olatowun's point about education, but another part that is often not talked about is the healthcare system. If you're not healthy, you're not a healthy individual, you cannot be a health professional. And I'll just give you some numbers that can help sort of situate it. Nigeria is one of the worst countries in the world to be a pregnant woman. You are likely, almost 30 or 40 times more likely to die in childbirth in Nigeria than you are in some other countries in Africa. So let's not even go outside of the continent, even in Africa. So I think we need to invest in healthcare systems that are going to help create healthy women and healthy individuals who can then be healthy professionals in the future.
Thank you. I like that. Not only will the health system get you, the workplace will get you, one of them. So Kofo, what do you think about making sure that this needle is moved when it comes to human capital development?
Well, I quite agree with what Tung and Mayowa have said. On the one hand, education is the root of human capital formation, whether we like it or not. And health, yes, you have to improve the national quality of life anyway, because if you're not healthy, then you can't work. But then basically what we need to do to advance our economy, we need to reposition Nigeria among the Committee of Nations. And so how do we do that? It's a key strategy for economic competitiveness and growth. So, we need to end poverty. We need to develop new education policies, strategies, and have deliberate education reforms. It's going to take a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen overnight. But then we need to put the money there, but be sure that there is a correlation between the money that is spent and what comes out of it.
So, Tom, how do you convince people that all we are talking about is not tokenism?
How do we convince them? Well, it's not tokenism if a woman is qualified for any position. And that's really what it is. If we say, for example, if there's a policy, okay, let's look at the banks, right? CBN, when
Sanusi
was CBN governor, and he put that policy in place for 30%. And this is why we see a number of female MDs, a number of females in the C-suite in the banking sector. So it's not that there aren't women that are qualified, it's that, men will generally tell you, okay, it's a huge generalization, that, we can't find any women. But, I always say, if you're looking for a woman to sit on a board, come to GAIA and we'll give you, a few that you can look at, because, it depends on the spec, et cetera, right? Or the experience and all that. But one thing I would like to say is that one thing that women can do is sponsor other women. And, sponsorship is such that there's somebody who is constantly able to speak about you when you're not in the room. Because, for example, in the corporate world, okay, so if there happens to be one woman in leadership, she needs to be able to talk about, the women that are coming up. She needs to be able to, fight for her, really. But to do that, obviously, that woman that she's fighting for must have the experience, the training, all the stuff that she needs. She just needs somebody to remember that she's there, because they will remember all the men, but they won't necessarily remember women.
So the idea is to try and populate this where the women already exist, like in the workplace, populate it more. And Mayowa, I wonder though, what you would be telling younger women who are getting into the workspace and knowing what they're going to get, what they should know, and what we must do to help them move that needle.
I think you have to be, if you're a young woman coming into the workspace now, you have to make sure that you do the work and you do the work you've been doing, you're supposed to be doing. And don't give people an excuse to say, this is why, I don't like women. Because unfortunately, it does happen, right? Some people do take advantage. And then that also spoils, as we say in Nigeria, it spoils the market for everybody else. So I think it's important to make sure that you do the job that you're supposed to do and do it well. And don't give people an excuse to say, this is why I don't want a woman.
Thank you, Mayowa. I know that we must sign off with you now. That's your final statement, and we do wish you well as you go. And I'd like to move on to Mayowa. So it's fine for you to sign off now. That's fine.
Thank you, Mayowa.
Thank you very much, Mayowa. We appreciate the time. Well done. And Kofo, I would like your final words to also be on the area of this, address this issue of tokenism. Especially, you talk about mentoring and mentorship, right? What do you tell potential mentees, the attitudes that they have, and also mentors to ensure that this pull-up you're talking about will be effective? That's your final words.
Yeah. We need to encourage them. I mean, we need to show them that their opportunities. We should let them know that it's hard work. That because they're target, so we are not going to make the numbers good just for doing it. We're going to put people who are qualified, and so they've got to work hard, they've got to strive. They shouldn't look down on themselves and think that, oh, because I'm a woman, I can't get there. We need to encourage them that they can get there. And that the sky is the limit.
It's good to hear.
You can get to the top if you aim at it and you can work hard to get there.
And do the right things too. And Toun,
do the right things, definitely.
That's right. And as we round up, for GAIA, what would move the needle be?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What do you
When
mean?
you say let's move the needle,
Yeah.
when would you say we've actually moved the needle?
As of today?
Yeah. Well, maybe if in 10 years or whatever.
Oh, I see. So what does the future look like?
Absolutely.
Is that what you mean? Oh, okay. So the future would be positive if there are more women in government, if there are more women CEOs, especially of the public companies, if there are more women who are in the formal sector working, yeah, and if women are not treated as objects.
Wow, that's a very nice way to end. But we're going to be talking about other things treated as objects. Yes. So there's a lot of conversations. So these conversations, we are all aiming at ensuring that that needle is moved. Today, we've identified that key things would be legislation, one way, but also investing in human capital and giving women the skills that they need to be able to fill those positions that exist. So that's been edition 1. We'll be talking about other things as we go along on the show. Thanks, Toun, for this.
Thank you.
And once again, I want to thank those who've made this possible.
Once again, we want to thank Pinnacle Oil and Gas for their sponsorship, without which this would not be happening.
Thank you. And that's it for today.